Let's talk about the SEC. They have been doing some pretty crazy things, as we all know, in the cryptocurrency markets. They've been really protecting investors, haven't they? It's really this kind of relationship where it's like we have some evil machine hunting us and we're just crying in the corner. Don't crash my bags anymore, Gary Gensler. What are you doing? What are you doing, man? It is definitely a situation of overreach by the SEC right now, but we do have some pretty interesting things that have been happening. And I want to point a few of those out here for you, because while we see the SEC going after Coinbase and Binance US and Gemini and Kraken, and of course they completely avoided FTX, one of the biggest frauds in the space. And of course, they not only did not investigate FTX, but they actually met with them on multiple occasions. And there was a rumor there they were going to try to help them to corner the market in the cryptocurrency space. How that would have played out, hard to say, but the SEC has not proven itself to be a great actor in the cryptocurrency space. We do have some pushback happening right now. So we had three big court cases are going on. And we had some announcements from those court cases. So this is Paul Grewal. He is the chief legal officer over at Coinbase. So he says a few minutes ago, the SEC filed its response to the last week's Third Circuit. Basically, what the Coinbase situation is right here is that Coinbase is asking the SEC for clarity, saying you have failed to do the thing you're supposed to do, essentially. And so they're now suing them in court over that, the SEC suing them back, right? But here's the key things. So they repeat the fallacy that they haven't made any decision on new crypto rules. 2, they refuse to commit to any deadline despite the court's explicit order to do so. And they instead anticipate making a recommendation in 120 days. And most importantly, they ignore the clear statement of the chair that confirmed that they have no intent to issue new rules and instead conflate the evidence of a decision that those statements provide with an argument that the statements are themselves a decision. So basically, we have the SEC continuing to drag its feet here when it comes to Coinbase. They want to do anything but actually regulate the crypto space. It's actually pretty insane when you understand how the SEC has been behaving with these major companies. We see Coinbase, right? One of the biggest companies in the cryptocurrency industry. And they have been treated so terribly. I mean, it's no surprise that you have Hong Kong regulators saying, hey, Coinbase, come to Hong Kong, set up shop here. Dubai saying, hey, come and set up shop here. Get out of America. You're not being treated well. We'll treat you real good over here. Coinbase, they've been fighting a crazy fight. They've been trying relentlessly to get any kind of answers from the SEC. And it makes you realize the SEC is not interested in protecting investors. They're interested in protecting the status quo. They're interested in protecting the big banks and in moving more power and more money to the big banks. Less for you, more for them. It's a broken system. Remember, Gary Gensler, the current chief of the SEC. Now, he used to be an MIT professor and he taught blockchain, although he says he's never owned a cryptocurrency or even used a digital wallet, and he's the guy supposed to be regulating it. Before that, he had a very interesting job. He worked at Goldman Sachs. May as well work to JP Morgan. I'm sure they all hung out and had drinks together. Crazy, crazy stuff, right? These are the people regulating the industry that is, in essence, a challenge to their entire business model in which they would like to corner the market on. Now, we also had a big announcement in the Binance case. So the SEC was requesting to freeze the assets of Binance US during this ongoing lawsuit that they have. The US judge has come out and said, no, sorry, we're not going to do that, at least for now. So kind of a win for Binance US users. If you do have money on, well, any exchange, not just Binance US, but if you have money on any exchange, get your money off the exchanges, put it in your damn hardware wallets, stop messing around. That is very, very important. Okay. So definitely keep that in mind, guys. The exchanges are marketplaces. This is something we all need to remember. Exchanges are marketplaces, right? Exchanges are marketplaces. They are not banks, right? So if you have your money in Binance US, whatever other exchange. I mean, I like Kraken, great exchange, right? And they literally tell you, don't keep your money on our exchange, right? So let's get into the next story here. And that is about XRP and the Bill Hinman stuff. So this is pretty big. And look, I'm not an expert on the XRP lawsuit or the Ripple lawsuit by any means, but this is pretty damn surprising what we are seeing with this Ripple case. So this is from Stuart Alderati. He is the chief legal officer over at Ripple. So he says it's been 5 years since Bill Hinman gave his infamous speech, and through the SEC's lawsuit against Ripple and 7 court orders, we can finally share what happened behind the scenes through the now public emails and drafts of the speech. He goes on to say, we can now see all see that Hinman ignored multiple warnings that his speech contained made-up analysis with no basis in law, was divorced from the Howey factors, exposed regulatory gaps, and would create not just confusion, but greater confusion in the market. He goes on to say, a refresher, Hinman, as the head of the SEC's corporate finance division, gave a speech in June 2018 declaring that a token is not a security once it becomes sufficiently decentralized, and he invented factors to consider when making a sufficiently decentralized determination. Point number 4, although Hinman claimed that the speech was his personal view, he and the SEC touted it as guidance. Then SEC Chair Jay Clayton publicly pointed to it, despite the SEC repeatedly flip-flopping on the significance of the speech in litigation. It remains on the agency's website. Number 5, now let's look at what senior SEC officials directly said to Hinman about his speech as he was drafting it. Point 6, head of trading market said, because the list of factors is so extensive and appears to include things that go beyond the typical Howey analysis, we have concerns that this might lead to greater confusion on what is a security. Hinman ignored those concerns. 7, TNM directly asked Hinman to tie his newly invented factors more closely and explicitly to the Howey analysis. Again, Hinman ignored the suggestion. 8, Office of General Counsel in TNM called this factor legally irrelevant. Has this person or group retained a stake or other interest in the digital asset such that it would be motivated to expand efforts to cause an increase in the value in digital assets? Hinman kept it. TNM and OGC noted Hinman skipped over the threshold jurisdiction question of whether a digital asset meets the legal standards of a security. He jumped to asking whether SEC oversight could, in Hinman's view, be beneficial. Hinman ignored this regulatory gap. On June 4th, Hinman wrote that he didn't see a need to regulate ETH as a security and called Buterin later that week to confirm our understanding. June 12th, OGC expressed its reservations about including a statement directly about Ether in the speech because it would make it difficult for the agency to take a different position on ETH in the future. ETH remained as a cited example. Very interesting. So he goes on, what should happen now? First, remove the speech from the SEC's website. Investigation must be conducted to understand what or who influenced Hinman, conflicts of interest, all that fun kind of stuff. This is pretty big news. And as Nick Carter points out, the day has barely started and already a big setback for the SEC. They argue that Hinman was just a loose cannon going off on his own. But it's clear now that he got sign off from the highest levels in the SEC to say the things that he said. Yo, this is big stuff. A pretty crazy situation going on right now at the SEC. See, the SEC is challenging the richest and most powerful companies in the cryptocurrency industry, the best connected companies in the cryptocurrency industry. Companies like Coinbase that are friends with senators and congressmen and do have powerful people on speed dial, right? And they have the money to actually go and fight this stuff in court. You see smaller companies like Library Credits. I don't know if you guys ever heard of them. They're a file sharing website, kind of like YouTube, but on the blockchain, essentially. They got sued by the SEC and they just didn't have the money to defend themselves. I think the Ripple team, they spent $200 million or something like that on legal fees defending themselves against the SEC. Basically have a rogue mafia-like organization that's out there collecting fees, shaking people down, and anybody who can't afford to pay the protection money goes out of business. So it's absolutely crazy. So I'm happy to see these companies fighting back against the SEC. I stand with all the companies that are fighting against the SEC. I'm not an XRP investor, but I hope that Ripple wins their damn case. I really do. And, I don't use Coinbase, but I hope that Coinbase wins their case and on, right? We need clarity in the markets. We need regulatory clarity. And we really need lawmakers to step in and do something. Although under the current administration, we're probably not going to get a lot of things done because Biden would probably veto anything that comes across his desk because that's what the bankers will tell him to do. Now, we do have some big regulatory stuff happening from a lawmaking perspective, and we're getting to that in just a moment. Before we do, just a reminder, if you are not signed up to the newsletter yet, you got to check it out. It's called Wealth Mastery. It is an absolute banger of a newsletter. It's the best newsletter in the cryptocurrency industry. Every single week, we send this to your inbox. It takes me and my team about 40 hours to put all this stuff together throughout the week. It takes about 10 minutes to read the newsletter. Altcoins, DeFi, charts, airdrops, and much more. So do go and check that out if you want to stay up to date with all the latest happening in the crypto industry beyond just these sweet videos and stuff like that, go and check out our newsletter. It's free. 75,000 readers a week are reading this, so go and check it out. Now, let us talk about the laws that are coming forward potentially. So I want to mention this real quick from Tim Draper. This is his opinion. He said, weak regulators spread fear and strong regulators spread opportunity. The Howey test was nearly 80 years ago and has no relevance to crypto today. Remember the Howey test? The Howey test was designed over an orange orchard in Florida almost 100 years ago now. It's insanity. They're trying to use this to regulate digital tokens. He says, I think crypto needs to be regulated in a new way from a new group. I think our regulators are acting way out of line, and it's time to rein them in. Gary Gensler is damaging our country. This from Warren Davidson. Warren Davidson, he has filed the SEC Stabilization Act to restructure the SEC and, most importantly, to fire Gary Gensler. Now, Gary, remember, there's so many videos of him floating around the internet right now where he is saying basically, oh, well, these things are securities. These things aren't, talking about Algorand. And later on, I guess Algorand's a security. So was it a problem when Gary talked about it? And all these different things. And his lack of protection, his closeness with companies like FTX, that's problematic stuff when you really start to think about it, right? So maybe we do need a new head at the SEC. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen under this current administration, but certainly this bill, whether or not it gets through, at least somebody out there is making a bit of a fuss about this, right? So the SEC Stabilization Act explained basically, of course, firing Gary Gensler, but changing the way that the rulemaking is done. So all rulemaking enforcement and investigations will be conducted by 6 commissioners. So look at how it changed the structure of this situation. Right now, you have basically the Gary Gensler dictatorship at the SEC. Gary decides what to do. His commissioners have to kind of go with that. Whereas a new structure would put actually a board of commissioners in charge with then the executive director carrying that stuff out. So a much more collaborative effort at the SEC versus a more dictatorial situation at the SEC that we've been seeing playing out. As Jake Chervinsky points out here, there's no doubt that crypto will thrive in the future. The only question is where. Well, the SEC tries to ban crypto by enforcement. The rest of the world is competing to attract innovators and investors. U.S. policymakers need to think hard about whether this is the outcome that they want. And this is in response to a tweet from Rishi Sunak. He is the Prime Minister of the UK. He said, great news, the A16Z, one of the world's leading tech investment firms, is now opening a base here in London. Another huge vote of confidence in the UK as a place to build and grow tech businesses of the future. Whoa, this is something you're going to see a lot more of. We're going to see major companies, major tech companies, major crypto companies, companies doing major innovative stuff, getting out of the US markets as long as this kind of regulatory overreach is happening. Right? The USA is going to lose about 1 million Web3 jobs are going to go overseas. The amount of tax revenue is insane that they're going to lose, and on and on and on. The United States had this moment where they could have been the leader of crypto. And instead, we have politicians beholden to bankers who are basically taking a very antagonistic approach where we see other countries, the UK, the EU, France within the EU, United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Hong Kong, and many other places, Brazil, all innovating and welcoming these industries on their shores. Now, obviously, everyone wants to do business with the US, right? Of course, biggest capital market in the world. So it's a big deal what happens in the US, but they will lose that business. They will lose that business if they keep going in this direction. And I'm surprised that companies like Coinbase just haven't left already, to be honest.